The first time Hunter told me we could never be more than friends, it felt like someone had turned the sun off. He said it casually, like it was a fact of life, like the sky being blue or the ocean being endless. But I could see his hands shaking when he said it. We were sitting on the hood of his old Jeep, parked on the cliff overlooking Crestwood Bay. The waves crashed beneath us, restless and untamed, like the way my heart felt every time he looked at me. I remember the way his voice broke just a little when he said it. "Rowan, I can't. You know I can't." But the thing about Hunter was that his eyes always betrayed him. They said things his mouth couldn't. They said maybe, they said I wish, they said God, I wanna. And that night, as the wind tangled his hair and the stars started blinking awake, I realized something. No matter what he said, we were already past the point of pretending. Hunter and I met our junior year of high school, in a photography class neither of us wanted to take. He was the golden boy, the kind of guy who could make teachers laugh, make friends with anyone, and make you feel seen just by looking your way. I was quieter, more reserved. I liked details, light, shadows, the way emotion could be captured without saying a word. The first picture I ever took of Hunter wasn't even supposed to be about him. He'd been standing near the window, sunlight spilling through his hair, his hand brushing his jaw as he stared out into nothing. The photo caught him mid-thought, raw, unguarded, human. When he saw it, he didn't say a word. He just looked at it for a long time and whispered, "That doesn't even look like me." But it did. Maybe not the version he showed everyone, but the one beneath. We started hanging out after that, editing photos in the library, sneaking into the old train yard to take pictures of rusted engines, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his father, the pressure to play football, the expectations to date girls and smile wide for family pictures. I told him about the loneliness that came with pretending I was fine when I wasn't. There were no confessions, no labels, just connection. But somewhere between the late-night drives and the quiet laughs under broken streetlights, friendship became something else. It was in the way our shoulders brushed and neither of us pulled away. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The way silence between us started to feel heavier. Not awkward, just charged. I think we both knew it, even if we didn't say it out loud. The night everything changed. It was raining. One of those slow, endless rains that blurred everything into gray. Hunter had come over after a fight with his dad. His knuckles were red, not from hitting anyone, just from holding back. We sat on my bedroom floor, backs against the wall, listening to the rain. He looked tired. Not just physically, soul tired. The kind of tired that comes from living someone else's life too long. I remember reaching out without thinking, brushing my thumb over his bruised knuckles. He flinched at first, then let out a shaky breath. His eyes met mine, and for the first time he didn't look away. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. But suddenly, he was close enough that I could feel his breath on my skin. Close enough that I could count the freckles near his lip. "Rowan," he whispered, like it hurt to say my name. And then, softly, like a secret, he kissed me. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't rushed. It was the kind of kiss that asked a question and gave an answer all at once. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. "We can't," he said again. But his voice cracked this time, like he didn't even believe his own words. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, at the boy who wanted to be brave but didn't know how. And even though he left that night, even though the rain swallowed the sound of his footsteps, I knew nothing between us would ever be the same. The next few weeks were a blur. We avoided each other at school, our eyes darting away whenever we passed in the hall. Our friends noticed, of course. They made jokes we didn't laugh at. But sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me from across the cafeteria, that same look he gave me on the cliff, the one that said everything his lips were too scared to. Then one afternoon, he showed up at my locker. He looked exhausted. "Can we talk?" he asked. We drove to Crestwood Bay again. The same place, the same Jeep. This time, he didn't say anything for a long time. The wind howled, waves crashed, and we just sat there in the heavy quiet. "I'm scared, Ro," he finally said. I turned to him. "Of what?" He stared straight ahead. "Of what this means. Of what people will think. Of who I'll be if I stop pretending." His voice broke on the last word. And in that moment, I saw it, the fear, the longing, the war inside him. I didn't reach for him. I didn't try to fix it. I just said softly, "You don't have to be anyone else when you're with me." He looked at me then, really looked. And for a moment I thought he might say it. That he might finally let go. But instead, he closed his eyes, ran a hand through his hair and said, "We can't. Not now." And that was the end of it. Or at least it was supposed to be. Summer came. He worked at the local gas station. I picked up shifts at the bookstore downtown. We barely talked. But every time he drove past on his motorcycle, he'd glance my way. Just once. Just long enough for my heart to remember how it felt to be known. Then one day he didn't just drive past. He stopped. It was late, closing time, and I was locking up. He parked across the street, helmet tucked under his arm, rain dripping off his jacket. He looked like a storm that had forgotten where to go. "Hey," he said. "Hey." We stood there in silence. The air between us felt electric, like something waiting to catch fire. "I tried," he said quietly. "I really tried to move on." My chest tightened. "Did it work?" He shook his head. "No." The streetlight flickered above us, and for a second, the world felt still. Then he took a step closer, and another, until he was right in front of me. His voice dropped. "Tell me to stop, Rowan. If you tell me to stop, I will." I didn't. Because I couldn't. That night, we didn't talk about right or wrong, or what would happen next. We just existed, two people standing in the space between fear and love, choosing each other for one small, impossible moment. And when he kissed me again, it wasn't hesitant this time. It was everything he'd been holding back. The ache, the want, the freedom. But even as I kissed him back, part of me knew it wouldn't last. Because love, for us, was never simple. It was beautiful, but it was breaking us. When his father found out a month later, everything exploded. Hunter stopped answering my calls. He didn't come to school. Rumors started, cruel, loud, impossible to ignore. And then, one night, I found him at the old train yard again, sitting where we used to, staring at the empty tracks. His eyes were red. His voice was barely a whisper. "They're sending me to live with my uncle. Out of state." I felt the world tilt. "When?" "Tomorrow." Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. "You're just leaving?" He looked at me, and for the first time, there was no conflict in his eyes. Just pain. "If I stay, I'll break, Ro. And I can't ask you to break with me." He reached out, touched my cheek, and smiled. That small, sad smile I'd come to love. "You were the only thing that ever felt real." And then he was gone. Just like that. I didn't see him again for 3 years. Not until the night I walked into a gallery downtown and saw a photograph that stopped me cold. It was black and white. A boy standing by the ocean, eyes closed, wind in his hair. The caption read, "Crestwood Bay, 2019, by Hunter Reed." And in that moment, I realized something. He might have left, but a part of him never really did. When I saw that photograph, our photograph, something in me cracked open. It wasn't just a picture. It was a memory caught in time, one I had spent years trying to forget. The exact way the light bled into the horizon, the faint outline of the same cliff where we used to sit. It was all there. And standing in that crowded gallery, surrounded by strangers sipping champagne and murmuring about composition, I realized that Hunter had carried me with him all this time. My hands were shaking as I scanned the room, hoping, no, praying, that he might be there. And then I saw him. He was standing across the gallery, near a series of portraits. His hair was shorter now, his jaw a little sharper, his presence quieter. But it was him, the same boy who'd once told me we couldn't be more than friends, the same boy whose eyes had said otherwise. He looked up at the exact moment I did. For a second, neither of us moved. The noise around us faded, replaced by the hum of everything we never got to say. Then he smiled, small, cautious, but real. I felt my breath catch. He walked toward me, each step deliberate, like he was testing the ground beneath him. I could see it in his eyes, the same storm I remembered. When he stopped in front of me, the space between us felt charged again, just like it had that night under the rain. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey." My voice came out uneven. "You came. I didn't know you'd be here," I admitted. "But I guess I should have known." He laughed under his breath, that same low, familiar sound that used to unravel me. "You look good, Ro." "So do you," I said. "Different, but you." We stood there, staring at each other, both unsure how to fill the silence. Finally, he gestured toward the photograph. That day at the bay, I couldn't get it out of my head. Every time I tried to take a new picture, it came back. "You came back." I swallowed hard. "You left without saying goodbye." "I know." He looked down, his jaw tightening. "I thought it'd be easier. For both of us." "Was it?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, it never was." For a long moment, we just stood there, two ghosts of who we used to be, surrounded by art that tried to capture the pieces we'd lost. After the show, we went for coffee. The city outside buzzed with neon and rain, but inside, it was just us again, like no time had passed, and yet, everything had. He told me about the years after he left, the silence, the guilt, the long nights spent staring at photos that never felt complete. He said he'd studied photography in Chicago, that his uncle had helped him start over. "But I never stopped thinking about you," he admitted quietly. I looked at him, my heart caught somewhere between anger and relief. "Then why didn't you call?" He sighed. "Because I was still trying to figure out who I was. And I didn't want to drag you through that mess again." I nodded slowly. "You could have just asked me to walk through it with you." He looked up, eyes softening. "I know. I was scared, Rowan. I still am." His honesty disarmed me. For years, I'd replayed our story in my head, all the ways it could have ended differently. And now, sitting across from him, I realized it had never been about endings. It was always about timing. Outside, rain streaked down the window, reflecting the city lights like tiny constellations. Hunter reached across the table, hesitating just a moment before his fingers brushed mine. "I never stopped loving you," he said. The words landed heavy, not as a confession, but as a truth long overdue. I felt tears sting my eyes before I could stop them. "You can't just say that after all this time." "I know," he whispered, "but I needed you to know." Weeks passed after that night. We didn't rush anything. We met for coffee, walked by the river, talked about the lives we'd lived apart. It felt strange and familiar all at once, like picking up a song we'd never finished writing. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, and it didn't hurt anymore. Sometimes he'd show me a new photograph and I'd find myself in it again. Not literally, but in the way he captured emotion. Hunter had learned to see the world differently. One evening, he invited me to his studio. The place was small, tucked away on the top floor of an old brick building. Light poured in from a skylight, bathing the room in gold. There were photographs everywhere. Landscapes, portraits, moments frozen mid-laughter or mid-tear. And in the center of the room, hanging on the largest wall, was a series titled The Space Between. It was us. Me sitting on the hood of his Jeep, him looking out toward the ocean, our hands almost touching, but not quite. I turned to him, speechless. "I've been trying to finish this for years," he said, "but I couldn't because it never felt complete. Until now." I took a step closer, my heart pounding. "Why now?" He smiled, small, real, trembling. "Because you're here." That night, As the city fell quiet outside, we stood in his studio, surrounded by the ghosts of our past. He reached for me then, gently, carefully, like he was afraid I'd disappear. And when his lips met mine again, it wasn't desperate this time. It was steady, sure. For the first time, we weren't running from what we were. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Do you still think we can't be more than friends?" I whispered. He smiled faintly. "No, I think we were always more. I was just too scared to admit it." I laughed through my tears. "You always did have terrible timing." He grinned. "Guess I'm trying to fix that now." And in that small, golden studio, surrounded by photographs that told our story better than words ever could, I finally believed him. Months later, Hunter's new exhibition opened, The Space Between, and it was a success. Critics called it raw, vulnerable, human. But standing beside him that night, fingers intertwined, none of that mattered. What mattered was that we were seen. Not as something forbidden, not as something to hide, but as what we'd always been. Two souls who found each other, lost each other, and somehow, against everything, found their way back. As we left the gallery, the night air was cool and alive. He looked at me with that same look from years ago, the one that started it all, and said, "You know, I used to think love was supposed to be easy. And now?" I asked. He smiled. "Now I know it's supposed to be real." We walked home hand in hand, under a sky full of quiet stars. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was missing. Because he was right beside me, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as the boy who'd finally come home. And this time, his eyes didn't just say otherwise. They said forever. The gallery closed late that night, but neither of us wanted to leave. The last guests drifted out, the lights dimmed, and only the sound of distant traffic remained. Hunter stood in front of one of his photographs, the one that started it all, and I watched as his reflection blended with the image on the wall. For a moment, it was like the past and present had finally aligned. He turned to me, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. "You remember the first photo you ever took of me?" I nodded. "You mean the one by the window, when you said it didn't look like you?" "Yeah," he said softly. "I think you saw me before I even knew who I was." There was no sadness in his voice this time, only understanding. We'd both grown. Separately, painfully, but maybe that was the only way we could have found our way back. I stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "And do you know who you are now?" He smiled, that familiar crooked grin. "I think I'm starting to." He reached for my hand, tentative at first, then sure. His fingers laced with mine like they had years ago. And just like that, the years between us disappeared. We left the gallery and walked down the empty street, our shoes echoing against the wet pavement. The rain had stopped, but the world still glistened as if holding on to the memory of it. Streetlights cast long reflections that rippled with each step we took. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I asked quietly. "Every day," Hunter said. "But I think if we hadn't gone through all of it, we wouldn't be who we are now. And maybe we wouldn't have found our way back here." There was truth in that, painful, beautiful truth. Sometimes love needed distance to survive. Sometimes you had to lose something to see its worth. He squeezed my hand gently. "When I left, I thought I was saving us from falling apart. But all I did was tear us in half." "You were scared," I said. "We both were." "Yeah," he admitted. "But I'm not anymore." I looked at him then, the boy I'd loved, the man he'd become. There was still a trace of the same vulnerability in his eyes, but it was layered with strength now, a quiet confidence that came from finally choosing himself. We stopped near the river, the same one we used to photograph years ago. The water shimmered in the moonlight. He turned to face me fully. "Rowan," he said, his voice low but certain. "I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know where we'll go or how long we'll make it. But I know this. I don't want to keep pretending anymore. Not about us. Not about me. The air between us seemed to still. I felt the world narrow down to the space between his words and my heartbeat. I smiled, tears threatening to rise again. You don't have to pretend, Hunter. You never did. He let out a shaky laugh, then leaned in and kissed me. Slow, steady, grounding. It wasn't a question this time. It was an answer. Weeks passed into months. We moved slowly, carefully, not out of fear, but out of respect for what we'd been through. There were still moments of uncertainty, still ghosts that lingered in quiet corners, but we faced them together now. Hunter started teaching photography workshops. He said he wanted to help people capture truth. Not beauty, not perfection, but truth. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since before he left. Our lives didn't suddenly become easy, but they became real. One evening, I came home to find him developing photos in the darkroom. The red light bathed the space in warmth, and he looked so peaceful that I just stood there, watching him. He didn't notice me at first. He was focused, hands steady, eyes calm. When he finally looked up, he smiled. Caught me. What are you working on? I asked. Something new, he said, motioning me closer. It's about moments that change us. The ones that don't look like much until later. He handed me a still damp photograph. It was of two silhouettes standing under the same golden sky from Crestwood Bay, one slightly turned toward the other, hands almost touching. It's us, I whispered. He nodded. It always was. Later that night, we sat on the balcony, a blanket wrapped around us. The city hummed softly below, car lights streaking, music floating from distant windows. Hunter rested his head on my shoulder. Do you ever think we'll have to hide again? I thought about it, about the world, about how far it had come and how far it still had to go. Then I said, maybe, but if we do, we'll face it together this time. He smiled into my shoulder. Together. The word lingered in the air, fragile and strong all at once. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm and golden. I woke to find him sitting at the edge of the bed, camera in hand. Are you taking pictures of me while I'm sleeping? I mumbled. He grinned. Maybe. That's creepy. It's art. I threw a pillow at him and he laughed. That deep, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard in years. And just like that, everything felt easy again. A year later, we returned to Crestwood Bay. The same cliff, the same restless sea, the same wind that once carried our first heartbreak. Only this time, there was no distance between us. Hunter parked the Jeep, the same old one he'd restored, and we climbed onto the hood like we used to. Feels smaller than I remember, I said. Maybe we just got bigger, he replied, smiling. We sat in silence for a while, watching the horizon. The ocean glittered like spilled glass, endless and wild. Do you remember what you said to me here? I asked. He winced playfully. You mean when I said we could never be more than friends? Yeah. I've been trying to make up for that ever since. I nudged his shoulder. You're doing okay. He looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time I saw peace in his eyes. No more fear. No more running. I love you, he said simply. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't whispered like a secret. It was steady, certain, like the tide coming home. I smiled. I know. I love you too. And as the sun sank into the water, painting the sky in gold and rose, I realized something. Maybe love wasn't about being fearless. Maybe it was about being brave despite the fear. We'd been broken, rebuilt, and reborn in the space between all the things we couldn't say. And now, sitting on that same cliff with his hand in mine, I finally understood. He hadn't just looked at me like I was everything. He meant it. As the waves crashed below us, Hunter lifted his camera one last time. Smile, he said. I did. He snapped the photo, then turned the camera around so I could see. The picture was simple. Two silhouettes against a sunset, fingers intertwined, faces soft with love. "That's the one," he said. "The one for what?" "For the next exhibition." He grinned. "I'm calling it otherwise." I laughed, shaking my head. "Perfect. Because after everything, the years apart, the fear, the silence, that one word said it all. We weren't just friends. We weren't just a story that ended in heartbreak. We were otherwise,